destroying uranium green elements, including capturing a prototype reactor at Hagelock and records, heavy water, and uranium ingots at Tailfingen. 52. These were shipped to the U.S. for study and utilization in the U.S. atomic program. 53. Although many of these materials remain unaccounted for, the National Museum of Nuclear Science and History displayed a cube of uranium attained from this mission from March 2020. 54. 9 of the prominent German scientists who published reports in Kernphysikalistforschungsbericht as members of the Uranverein, 55, were picked up by Operation Alsos and incarcerated in England at Farm Hall in a bugged house under Operation Epsilon. Eric Bagg, Kurt Diebner, Walter Jellach, Otto Hahn, Paul Hartek, Werner Heisenberg, Horst Korching, Carl Friedrich von Weizsäcker, and Karl Wirtz. Also incarcerated was Max von Laue, although he had nothing to do with the nuclear weapon project. Gus Smith, the chief scientific advisor to Operation Alsos, thought von Laue might be beneficial to the post-war rebuilding of Germany and would benefit from the high-level contacts he would have in England. 56. In 1992 the transcripts were declassified. German physicist Manfred Popp analyzed the transcripts, as well as the documentation of Uranverein. When the German scientists heard about the Hiroshima bomb, Heisenberg admitted that he never calculated the critical mass for an atomic bomb. He did that immediately, and made serious calculation errors. Edward Teller and Hans Bethe saw the transcript, and drew the conclusion that Heisenberg did it for the first time. Only a week later Heisenberg gave an impressive lecture about the physics of the bomb. He correctly recognized many essential aspects, including the efficiency of the bomb, although he still underestimated it. For Popp, this is proof that Heisenberg and others did not spend time on a nuclear weapon during the war. To the contrary, avoided even thinking about it. 57, 58, Oranienburg plant. With the interest of the Heereswaffenamt, HWA, Army Ordnance Office, Nikolaus Riehl, and Hiskelard Gunter Works, set up an industrial-scale production of high-purity uranium oxide at the Oyagiselskaft plant in Oranienburg. Adding to the capabilities in the final stages of metallic uranium production were the strengths of the Degasar Corporation's capabilities in metals production. 59, 60. The Oranienburg plant provided the uranium sheets and cubes for the Uranmaskin experiments conducted at the KWIP and the Versuchsstall testing station of the Heereswaffenamt, Army Ordnance Office, in Gottow. The G1 experiment, 61, performed at the HWA testing station, under the direction of Kurt Diebner, had lattices of 6,800 uranium oxide cubes, about 25 tons, in the nuclear moderator paraffin. 16, 62, work of the American Operation Alsos teams, in November 1944, uncovered leads which took them to a company in Paris that handled rare earths and had been taken over by the Oyagiselskaft. This, combined with information gathered in the same month through an Alsos team in Strasbourg, confirmed that the Oranienburg plant was involved in the production of uranium and thorium metals. Since the plant was to be in the future Soviet zone of occupation and the Red Army's troops would get there before the Western Allies, General Leslie Groves, commander of the Manhattan Project, recommended to General George Marshall that the plant be destroyed by aerial bombardment, in order to deny its uranium production equipment to the Soviets. On the 15th of March, 1945, 612 B-17 Flying Fortress bombers of the 8th Air Force dropped 1,506 tons of high explosive and 178 tons of incendiary bombs on the plant. Riehl visited the site with the Soviets and said that the facility was mostly destroyed. Reel also recalled long after the war that Soviets knew precisely why the Americans had bombed the facility. The attack had been directed at them rather than the Germans. 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, French. From 1941 to 1947, Fritz Bock was a staff scientist at the QUIP, and worked with the Uhrenbrin. In 1944, when most of the QUIP was evacuated to Hechingen in southern Germany due to air raids on Berlin, he went there too, and he was the Institute's deputy director there. When the American Alsos mission evacuated Hechingen and Hagelock, near the end of World War II, French armed forces occupied Hechingen. Bock did not get along with them and described the initial French policy objectives towards the KWIP as exploitation, forced evacuation to France, and seizure of documents and equipment. The French occupation policy was not qualitatively different from that of the American and Soviet occupation forces, it was just carried out on a smaller scale. In order to put pressure on Bock to evacuate the QUIP to France, the French Naval Commission imprisoned him for 5 days and threatened him with further imprisonment if he did not cooperate in the evacuation. During his imprisonment, the spectroscopist Hermann Stuhler, who had a better relationship with the French, persuaded the French to appoint him as deputy director of QUIP. This incident caused tension between the physicists and spectroscopists at the QUIP and within its umbrella organization, the Kaiser Wilhelm Gesellschaft, Kaiser Wilhelm Society. 68, 69, 70, 71, Soviet. At the close of World War II, the Soviet Union had special search teams operating in Austria and Germany, especially in Berlin, to identify and obtain equipment, material, intellectual property, and personnel useful to the Soviet atomic bomb project. The exploitation teams were under the Soviet Alsos, and they were headed by Lavrentich Berier's deputy, Colonel General P. Zavanugin. These teams were composed of scientific staff members, in NKVD officers' uniforms, from the bomb project's only laboratory, Laboratory Number 2, in Moscow, and included Yulich Borisovich Karaitan, Isiak Konstantinovich Kikoin, and Lev Andreevich Artsimovich. Georgij Nikolaevich Furov had arrived earlier, although Kikoin did not recall a vanguard group. Targets on the top of their list were the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute für Physik, QUIP, Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Physics, the Frederick William University, today, the University of Berlin, and the Technische Hochschule Berlin, today, the Technische Universität Berlin, Technical University of Berlin. 72, 73, 74, German physicists who worked on the Uhrenbrin and were sent to the Soviet Union to work on the Soviet atomic bomb project included Werner Julius, Robert Doppel, Walter Hermann, Heinz Pose, Ernst Rex and Nikolaus Riehl, and Karl Zimmer. Gunter Wirths, while not a member of the Uhrenbrin, worked for Riehl at the Gesellschaft on reactor-grade uranium production and was also sent to the Soviet Union. Zimmer's path to work on the Soviet atomic bomb project was through a prisoner of war camp in Krasnogorsk, as was that of his colleagues Hans Joachim Born and Alexander Katch from the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute für Hirnforschung, QUI, Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Brain Research, today the Max Planck Institute für Hirnforschung, who worked there for N.V. Timofey Brzezinski, director of the Abteilung für Experimentelle Genetik, Department of Experimental Genetics. All four eventually worked for Riehl in the Soviet Union at Laboratory B in Sungul. 75, 76, von Arden, who had worked on isotope separation for the Reichspostministerium, Reich Postal Ministry, was also sent to the Soviet Union to work on their atomic bomb project, along with Gustav Hertz, Nobel laureate and director of Research Laboratory 2 at Siemens, Peter Adolf Thiessen, Director of Kaiser Wilhelm Institut für Physikalische und Elektrochemie, KWIPC, Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Chemistry and Electrochemistry, today the Fritz Haber Institute of the Max Planck Society, and Max Wöhner, Director of the Physical Chemistry Institute at the Berlin Technische Hochschule, Technical University of Berlin, who all had made a pact that whoever first made contact with the Soviets would speak for the rest. 77. Before the end of World War II, Thiessen, a member of the Nazi Party, had communist contacts. 78. On the 27th of April, 1945, Thiessen arrived at von Ardens Institute in an armored vehicle with a major of the Soviet Army, who was also a leading Soviet chemist, and they issued Arden a protective letter, Scott's brief. 79. Comparison to the Manhattan Project. The United States, British, and Canadian governments worked together to create the Manhattan Project that developed the uranium and plutonium atomic bombs. Its success has been attributed to meeting all four of following conditions. Smiley 80, a strong initial drive by a small group of scientists to launch the project. Unconditional government support from a certain point in time. Essentially unlimited manpower and industrial resources. A concentration of brilliant scientists devoted to the project. Even with all four of these conditions in place, the Manhattan Project succeeded only after the war in Europe had been brought to a conclusion. For the Manhattan Project, the second condition was met on the 9th of October, 1941 or shortly thereafter. Germany for a long time was thought to have fallen short of what was required to make an atomic bomb. 81, 82, 83, 84, mutual distrust existed between the German government and some scientists. 85, 86. By the end of 1941, it was already apparent that the German nuclear weapon project would not make a decisive contribution to ending the German war effort in the near term, and control of the project was relinquished by the Heereswaffenamt, HWA, Army Ordnance Office, to the Reichsforschungsrat, RFR. Reich Research Council, in July 1942. As to condition 4. The high priority allocated to the Manhattan Project allowed for the recruitment and concentration of capable scientists on the project. In Germany, on the other hand, a great many young scientists and technicians who would have been of great use to such a project were conscripted into the German armed forces, while others had fled the country before the war due to antisemitism and political persecution. 87, 88, 89. Whereas Enrico Fermi, a scientific Manhattan Project leader, had a unique double aptitude for theoretical and experimental work in the 20th century. 27. The successes at Leipzig until 1942 resulted from the cooperation between the theoretical physicist Werner Heisenberg and the experimentalist Robert Doppler. Most important was their experimental proof of an effective neutron increase in April 1942. 90. At the end of July of the same year, the group around Fermi also succeeded in the neutron increase within a reactor-like arrangement. In June 1942, some 6 months before the American Chicago Pile 1 achieved man-made criticality for the first time anywhere, Doppler's L4 urine masking was destroyed by a chemical explosion introduced oxygen, 91, which finished the work on this topic at Leipzig. Thereafter, despite increased expenditures, the Berlin groups and their extern branches did not succeed in getting a reactor critical until the end of World War II. However, this was realized by the Fermi Group in December 1942, so that the German advantage was definitively lost, even with respect to research on energy production. German historian Klaus Henschel summarizes the organizational differences as: compared with the British and American war research efforts united in the Manhattan Project, To this day the prime example of big science, the Uranium was only a loose line it, decentralized network of researchers with quite different research agendas. Rather than teamwork as on the American end, on the German side we find cutthroat competition, personal rivalries, and fighting over the limited resources. 92. In terms of financial and human resources, the comparisons between the Manhattan Project and the Uranium are stark. The Manhattan Project consumed some $2 billion, 1945, tilde $26 billion in 2022 dollars, in government funds, and employed at its peak some 120,000 people.